The Sacramento Kings have had trade calls on both Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to do a follow-up on the rumors that the Bulls have shown interest in Clint Capella, as well as look at how the Bulls once again benefited from not paying the luxury tax. And then finally, we're going to talk about how the Bulls really kind of missed a golden opportunity to set themselves up for the future with their inactivity this past season. We're going to get into all that plus more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So we got another, like I said before, with the free agency basically opening up for teams to re-sign their own internal free agents. You're going to get a lot of kind of news and kind of ideas and things like that. And this one comes from a writer, Nayan, I believe is how you Nayan, I believe how you say it. And I'm not even going to try to murder this man's last name. But in this article, it came out something that says this: recent reports suggest that the Kings have had trade discussions with the Chicago Bulls focusing on acquiring Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. This potential trade is part of the Kings' broader strategy to strengthen their lineup, aiming for a deeper playoff run. The package includes veteran forward Harrison Barnes, shooting guard Kevin Huerter, and draft pick compensation. While these offers were not enough to secure Anunoby and/or Siakam, the Kings hope that this mix of experienced players and future assets would entice the Bulls to part with LaVine and Caruso. This is an interesting dynamic and interesting trade, right? And so just to kind of recap here, we're going to go over the players that were mentioned as being in this trade. Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes. These are two players that are role players, make no mistake about it, right? Kevin Huerter himself, still only 25 years old, took a bit of a dip last season, right? Had shot much worse than what he did the season prior. It's kind of the only season he didn't take a step up. He's increased his role and output every year except last year he took a step back, averaging 10.2 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game on 44% shooting from the field and 36% shooting from three. Now, where these are different for Kevin Huerter is that in 2022-23, he shot the ball 48% from the field and 40% from three-point range, taking 6.8 three-pointers per game in 2022-23, down to 5.3 in 2023-24. So Harrison Barnes is a really good role player. Not Harrison Barnes, I'm sorry, Kevin Huerter is a really good role player, and I like Kevin Huerter for who he is. I do think that slump last year is a bit concerning. I think his role did change. I think he had some injury concerns at some point as well. He only played 64 games last year, only started 59 of those. But Kevin Huerter is a player that I have always liked, right? Not to say that he can come in, replace Zach LaVine. That's not there. But he is a player that understands what he does well, and I think he can fit really nicely in the system. The 3.5 rebounds as a guard is really solid. The 2.6 assists that he's averaged last season as well is really solid as well. And he's averaged almost a steal per game the last two seasons, so he's active, right? I wouldn't call him a defender, but he's active, right? And so I think that he's the type of player that could really thrive in a system. Now, some people are going to ask, do the Bulls have that system? That's a story and a conversation for another day. But I like Kevin Huerter overall. Is it a great deal for Zach LaVine? No. And then Harrison Barnes is a guy that I've always kind of liked as he just understands what he does. Can play either forward position. He still averaged 12 points per game last year, three rebounds on 47% shooting overall from the field. He's also a solid enough three-point shooter, hitting it at 38% last year, and doing that, taking four and a half three-pointers per game, basically. And on his career, he's a 38% shooter as well. So it's not like he's ever shot the ball terribly from three. He's a solid enough three-point shooter to where you have to guard him at that line. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, I don't want Harrison Barnes. You saw what he did in the final. Like, you guys know my mindset. I'm not going to use just the playoffs. There are 82 games before you get to the playoffs, and we don't even know if the Bulls make this trade, if the playoffs are going to actually be the goal. We're already a team that basically misses out on the playoffs. But still, Harrison Barnes is still a very productive player. To me, the thing that kind of either makes or breaks this trade, in my personal opinion, is what is that draft compensation going to look like? The Sacramento Kings have the 13th overall pick in this draft and the 45th overall pick in this draft. Not saying that the Bulls can get both of them. Hell, I'm not even saying the Bulls can get either of them, but that's what they have to offer if it's in this draft. They also have a a pick that's top 12 protected in 2025. Could they be willing to throw that in? You would think if they're going in on trying to make the playoffs, it's not going to be the chances of it being top 12 are very slim. So you have that aspect of it as well. But the Bulls can maybe sweeten the pot with the Portland pick or something like that. But this is overall the type of move that I expect the Bulls are getting a lot of calls on. Could you package Alex Caruso and Zach LaVine and get that? And can teams put enough to get that done? Like I said, this isn't a trade where I'm sitting here, I'm gonna scream at you and say this is the move that the Bulls need to make. Nothing like that, right? But I do think depending on when you pair that with what we've heard with Zach LaVine's trade value, this is something that you can expect to get. Now, the fact of adding in Alex Caruso to that, to me, means that draft compensation better be damn good. To me, it better be damn good. And so the Kings are obviously a team that are trying to make moves to get themselves closer to being able to actually contend in the playoffs, not just compete for the playoffs, to contend in the playoffs. And when you look at Harrison Barnes' deal, he's under contract until to the end of the 2025-26 season. So you got 2 more years under contract for him and Kevin Huerter. So you're taking in an additional year of salary as far as with the Alex Caruso deal, but you're taking on a year less of salary with the Zach LaVine deal with both of these moves that the Bulls could make. And again, Kevin Huerter only 25, 26 years old. He's somebody that you can still maybe factor into your long term. And I think the kind of way that Kevin Huerter plays in his game, he can really play on any team. It's just if he's going to be more effective than what he was last season. So this is the first time that I heard that the Kings, were making those calls on Alex Caruso, on Zach LaVine. Now, what we've heard about from on Alex Caruso over the last couple of days, now that may throw into doubt if the Bulls actually are going to look to trade Alex Caruso. But this is overall not a terrible trade. I know some Bulls fans are gonna, I know they're gonna have their, oh no, if we're not getting Keegan Murray, we shouldn't do this deal. Like if Zach LaVine's trade value was that high, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? Let's be clear here. This is a team that's trying to add to what they have. They're not trying to distract from what they have or take too much away. And so maybe I don't know if a Davion Mitchell or anything like that can be thrown in there, but this is the type of move where I look at it and I say, it's not bad. It's not great. I want to be clear that it's not great. Also, you got to look at the fact that as well, Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes together still make less than what Zach LaVine is making, for example, next year. So the Bulls would get some cap savings in that frame as well. And since right now the Sacramento Kings have about $24 million beneath the luxury tax, they can't acquire more than they send out. They got to match it to a certain degree. So they have that little bit of room to where if they're still trying to avoid the luxury tax, they can. So, it's a deal that it makes sense as far as the contracts. It makes sense as far as the money. It makes sense as far as even the compensation. The question is this the type of deal that the Bulls would move on? What else would they need to throw in Alex Caruso, a player that reportedly they've gotten calls on getting multiple first-round picks back for? So that's what it all comes down to. But again, we'll see how this goes continually. We're about a week away from the NBA draft, and that's where we're really going to start finding things out. And that's the part that I can't wait to get to personally, is just getting to draft day, because for me personally, getting to the NBA draft is the most important thing. And if you get to that draft and what the Bulls do there, that's going to kind of tell to me and dictate what we do with the rest of the offseason. So if this is the type of move we hear called on draft night, like I said, I'm not necessarily hating it, but you got to show me what else you're going to do. What are you going to do with those additional draft picks? What else are you going to do with your roster? What direction are we going in? That's the questions that it would raise if this is the type of move that the Bulls make on draft day. But again, like I said, take everything with a grain of salt. Right now, we're in the high area as far as you're going to get a lot of trade rumors for a lot of teams and writers and things trying to put pieces together. But let me know what you guys think down below on this trade. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the next topic. This is something we did a breaking news episode on yesterday, and talking about the Bulls showing interest in Clint Capella. And we talked about the money on it, right? Clint Capella makes more than Nikola Vucevic at $22 million. And while his stat production is very similar to an Andre Drummond, he does it at almost 10 more minutes per game and about $16 million more per year as well on top of that. So the question that was raised by me when talking about this is, all right, the Bulls have shown interest in Clint Capella. In what type of move, though? $22 million is not easy for the Bulls to match unless it's part of a Zach LaVine trade, a Nikola Vucevic trade, a DeMar DeRozan signing trade, maybe. And none of those things are necessarily things that I see the Atlanta Hawks going after. Now, could the Atlanta Hawks look at Nikola Vucevic as somebody who becomes expiring next season? Maybe, but Clint Capella is expiring this season, I believe. So where's the benefit there? Or could they look at it and say, hey, we're getting 2 years of a starting level center, albeit I know some Bulls fans are going to say, but Haize, Vooch sucks. But anyway, you're going to maybe a starting caliber center, and maybe you're looking to move on, and bring in a new center, Alexander Sarr, whatever, and you don't want to have to worry about the center position. So you're looking at Vooch as a 2-year rental at that point. Maybe it's worth it, get off some money. The question is that I just don't see how this deal works out, and especially not for backup center money. Now, if the Bulls do draft a center, right? Let's say they draft a center, then maybe you're looking at Clint Capella as the veteran option there to start if the young center you draft isn't quite ready to start, but then it's only a 1-year deal. So technically, even though he's getting paid more than Vooch next season, you're still about $20 million of savings because he expires at the end of next season. But then, and then maybe you're hoping your young center is ready to start by then. Also, the Adama Sanogo portion of this, right? How does Adama factor in to whatever the Bulls are doing here at center, if he factors in at all, right? I know he had a really good G League season. He's basically given everything that you expect from a player playing in the G League. And not to say that those stats transfer over 1-for-1 in the NBA, but I will say that he's shown enough to make you think that as a rebound, a steal, and a block shot guy, he can be a backup center in this league. I do think from Adama Sanogo, you got some worry about pick and roll defense and kind of things like this. He slimmed down some as well, which could help with that. So those are kind of things that we're looking at. The Clint Capella aspect and the interest from the Chicago Bulls on Clint Capella is one of the more interesting things because it just doesn't fit as well as everything else. And then you look at Clint Capella, DeMar DeRozan on the court together. Spacing's an issue, maybe, right? But then again, it's not like DeMar DeRozan didn't play with Andre Drummond. And so, spacing is an issue playing with Nikola Vucevic because they like starting their offense at the same spots. At least Clint Capella is kind of the guy who he doesn't try to do too much. You can get as a lob threat, somebody who's going to operate around the rim, mainly thrive offensively off putbacks, things like that. You got to see where he fits in. But like I said, this is just an interesting piece in this whole dynamic because, like I said, I just don't see Clint Capella as being this piece that just fits perfectly. The contract doesn't really make sense for us to acquire with what we have right now unless other moves are coming. This is the type of move that you expect the Bulls to make if they're still trying to win now. Because again, we're not competing to win any titles or anything, but, win games now. And it's also the type of move that if it was easier to move on from Nikola Vucevic, and maybe the Bulls do find a trade partner, maybe they feel so confident in who they're drafting at the center position, if they're drafting one, or what other compensation they get back in the Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso pairing of a deal that they're willing to sell off Nikola Vucevic and maybe attach a Portland pick or a couple of seconds or something to get that deal done where they're not taking back as much salary. And then you open up a spot for that. Like, it's an interesting way to get it done. The player himself, I can understand some of why you would like Clint Capella. I do. I think he's a perfect player for this team. There's no perfect players in life, but perfect players for this team. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So I guess that would make the answer no. But as somebody who can get you a double-double, right, who can do that, who's still extremely durable over his career, over the last 4 seasons, all with Atlanta, the minimum games he's played is 63. So he's still durable. He still averages over a block per game, so he can do some rim protection for you as well. So there's enough to think there that, okay, maybe Clint can give you something. But like I said, it's kind of a weird deal when it's all said and done to me. But we'll see what happens with the Bulls there. But I just wanted to bring that here because, it just kind of all plays into what the hell are the Bulls doing, which we'll kind of talk about that here to end the show again. But moving into the next topic, it came out yesterday that all 22 NBA teams did not pay the luxury tax. Again, I say that and highlight that because a lot of Bulls fans think that just because we don't pay the luxury tax, it's like we're the only team that does that. As you can see, the majority of teams did not pay the luxury tax last year. I think especially looking at that more punitive second tax apron, they're kind of being a little bit more stringent on how they go over the luxury tax. But each of the 22 teams that did not pay luxury tax money are each going to receive almost $12 million. It's $11.96 million that each one of those teams are going to get. The teams with the highest tax bills were the Golden State Warriors at $176.9 million of just luxury tax payments. The Los Angeles Clippers as well with $142 million in luxury tax payments. And then the Phoenix Suns rounding that off with 68.2. It's important to point out that the Golden State Warriors and the Clippers had that high of payrolls because they got hit by that repeated tax, which is the things that teams are going to try to avoid, which the Phoenix Suns could pay at the end of next season. The Clippers could pay again at the end of next season. The Milwaukee Bucks could pay at the end of next season. So you're looking at that. But this just highlights, again, the Bulls just prioritizing money over anything. And, let me say the ownership doing that. And it'd be different because the Bulls have never paid the luxury tax. So they paid it once. They've been splitting this luxury tax payments out to teams for the majority of the time that the luxury tax has been a thing. And they don't invest that back. And you would think as much as you've been recouping money from teams that are paying the luxury tax, you'd be willing to say, hey, let's go ahead and go into the tax 1 or 2 years, right? We've been gaining this long enough. But no, that's not what the Chicago Bulls do. And you just look at it. The Bulls are bottom 10 in payroll. They're also bottom 10 record-wise, bottom 11 record-wise. And, people are going to make that go hand-in-hand, even though it's not necessarily as hand-in-hand as what people make it out to be. But it is something that is alarming for a team that one of the biggest criticisms on it is that you're cheap and you don't want to pay to actually win games. You want to more so give the appearance of trying to win than actually making moves to try to win. This is something that does stick out to Bulls fans, and that is problematic for Bulls fans, rightfully so. So you guys can let me know what you guys think on that down below. Now, before we go, I'm going to put in my tinfoil hat. No, it's still a new era cap, but my tinfoil hat. And I'm going to talk about how the Bulls, something that we heard that I did not hear before. So this one's come from Alan Kellerstrass, who pointed this out. What is this, again, from an article? What is true is that the Bulls definitely turned down offers for both Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan to make the playoffs and then did not make the playoffs anyway. So at that point, you want to look at, all right, how has this potentially affected the Bulls? If you believe it, how has it affected the Bulls? Let's just say this. The Alex Caruso rumor trade for a top 10 pick in this draft, or the multiple first-round picks, because it got reported that they had multiple picks. I think sometimes we look at it too much as just the surface level. If the Bulls would have traded Alex Caruso, who, ultimately definitely hurts the team, but the team didn't make the playoffs either. In this scope, you're looking at how do you improve the team in the long run. By turning down those multiple draft picks, you've now taken away a chance to, of course, add young talent to your team, which you then hope to develop well enough that it then truly extends your ability to win over a long term. But hey, let's even say without adding the young players, you have now also taken away to have more assets to then move up in the draft if you want to move up in any draft, right? When you have more draft assets, it gives you more to do. One of the reasons why we say the OKC Thunder, nobody can match the Thunder on any trade that they actually wanted to go all in on and make. And part of the reason for that is the sense that they have the draft picks, they have young talent as well. But when you have either young talent that teams could want in a rebuild, or you have draft picks and are willing to take on bad money with those draft picks, or you're able to package draft picks, that gives you more assets to either go out and get other players or trade up for the one player that you want. Let's say, for example, in this draft, the Bulls have their own 11th pick and one of the picks that fell into the top 10, the rumored pick for Alex Caruso. If you wanted a guy in the top 3, you could package those 2 picks and go out. If you just looked and said, now that guy who's going to go top 4, that's going to be the best player in this draft. You could have had an opportunity to package those picks to then go up and get your guy. The Bulls have taken that opportunity away from themselves as well. Or you could have added 2 young, promising players to this team. But then again, let's add another wrinkle to that. If you acquired more draft picks, it could have made it easier to move Zach LaVine as well, right? And that's saying having extra picks in drafts make it easier to dump off some salary or maybe even get something back. The Pistons rumored are interested in Zach LaVine. Are they willing to give up a top 5 pick to do it? But what if the Bulls had a top 10 pick, number 8, number 9, whatever? I don't know the teams that have that. I'm just using that as an example. Hell, let's even say that the Bulls had number 18 in this draft, number 19 in this draft. And then you take those picks and say, bet, Pistons, you want Zach LaVine. We know you don't necessarily want to give up a first-round pick, but You give us number 5 for Zach LaVine back. We got number 18 for you, or you give them your number 11. You're willing then to take on number 5, number 18. So, hey, Pistons, yeah, you're moving 6 spots down. We can get our guy that we think is going to be better overall for this team, and you can get Zach LaVine. The Bulls continually take away negotiating power from themselves, and that is where this team sits in a place where we have assets that aren't necessarily desirable, and we sit in a place where we truly don't have any movement on the things that we even want to move. This is where you say and talk about how a front office has to have some future foresight when they're making deals. They have to have vision in how they're making those moves. Until they do, you always end up back in the same spot of being in a spot where you either have to overpay to keep your guys, or you're sitting in a spot where you don't have a lot of draft capital. You have to at some point be willing to move on and bite on players that have the high value if you realize, and true, because now, where it sits right now, let's say the Bulls give it this one next season. They compete. They make the play-in. And then at that point, Alex Caruso moves on for nothing. Let's say DeMar DeRozan decides to move on for nothing. Or you're stuck overpaying DeMar DeRozan. Wouldn't it be nice if while you're overpaying DeMar for a team that's not making it out the play-in, that you have some young promising players, 2 or whatever, or some future picks? Wouldn't that be nice? That is where we go. And us as Bulls fans, we get caught up in that too. I hear so many Bulls fans, we can't let Alex Caruso go. And don't get me wrong, I want Alex Caruso to stay here long term as well, but you got to be willing to do the things that are going to make that more fruitful as well. We can't let go of DeMar DeRozan. Why? So we can sit in the play-in yet again and get eliminated and sit in the same spot where next season we don't have a first-round pick and we're just sitting there looking like, well, at least we made the play-in. You got to take some chances and take some risks. And the Bulls have not really taken on very many risks since they initially put this team together. And it's time to start taking risk again, at least in my opinion. But then it goes to the point of, do we even trust this front office to make the right moves, the right decision, be it in a draft or anything else? And that, my friends, is what I don't have the answer to. And I wish that I had more confidence in this team to do those things. But this is where we sit as Bulls fans. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in yet again. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.